My man, what's going on, Doc?
What's up, Fred?
You the man. We want to welcome you to Freddie O Live, where we will be discussing topics about reachable reconciliation, which basically means how do we learn how to have the conversations that we would not normally have in an effort to make sure that we don't bypass the people that are right within our reach. So, guest today is my great friend, Dr. Dorrien Hinsey, who is pastor of a very fast-growing multicultural church, Compass Community Church. In addition, he is also a spiritual advisor to me, a confidant, but he's a lover of God and a lover of people, and so welcome today.
Dude, you really made that sound really
That sounded good, didn't it, man?
You prettied that up real good.
But did I still sound like a brother when I said it? Okay, I wanted to, yeah, right? Because I got to be multicultural even in this space, you know.
I got you. That was rich. I appreciate that. That was good.
Yeah, you know, it's for the audience. It's for the audience. Man, listen, here's how I'd love to open up. I want to kind of tell a story. And so there is a local mega church that I interact with leadership periodically. And some of the funny instances, well, let me say this. They gift me office space, which I'm quite thankful, but they have no idea what I do.
Right.
It's one of those things where, hey, here's somebody that does urban ministry. Here's somebody that does community outreach. Let's gift him some office space, almost in an effort for them to feel good. When I show up there, they'll say things like, hey, what's it going to take for you to come and join our church? Should we play more Kirk Franklin songs? And I'm like, yeah, man, that's exactly how to get a brother in. But here's the kicker. So one year, Black History Month, because, that's when we get famous. Black History Month, because they need a black speaker, right?
Right.
But this wasn't the call. This pastor called me up and says, hey, you know what, Fred? It's Black History Month. I'm feeling like I should say something, give some kind of sermon message, but I don't know what a white pastor should say to an all-white audience.
About Black history.
About Black history. Right. So, I'm sitting on the phone because I'm already aware of where this conversation is going.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, Fred, would you be willing to come to all 4 of our services this coming weekend and share the platform with me? Yeah. We'll sit on bar stools and we'll just have a conversation. So that'll be Saturday night and all 3 services Sunday. And you know how we do? Sure, yeah. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Because I know that's the role I'm supposed to play at that point of the year for that 1 month.
Exactly.
So we have the services Saturday night. We're on bar stools, congregations out there. We're having dialogue, very surface. We're about to close, and the pastor says, before we close, Fred, I'd like to apologize for everything that my people have done to your people.
Wow.
So I sat there and said, thank you.
Yeah.
So service ended, got back home. About an hour later, cell phone rang. I picked it up. It's that pastor.
Yeah.
And he asked, hey, Fred, how do you think everything went tonight? I said, oh, yeah, I thought it went great. He said, well, I thought it went great too, but my elders and I were having some conversation, and we were in agreement that the one thing we wish we could have changed, and we hope that will change in the services for tomorrow, would be, you remember when I apologized to you on stage? I said, I do. We all thought that you should have apologized back.
Oh, wow.
And so there were a lot of things that went through my mind at that moment when he said that.
Yeah.
But basically, I said, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And I say that, Dorrien, because there's some things that I would have said in the moment, but just with the history of that church and our relationship, it's very clear that they do not want to have a personal relationship with me, which leads us into our topic today, right? Is doing life, right? Yeah. Let's do life.
Yeah.
And I gotta be honest, man, when I hear that kind of stuff, let's do life, I think of the white mainstream church, because they're like, hey, let's do life together. Yeah, hey, let's do life together.
Yeah.
And for me, I think there's almost a wall, because I'm saying, well, what does that mean? Because I know my life is a lot different than yours. And so you want us to interact and intersect to do life, but you adopt and love and embrace that phrase a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I have such a high regard and respect, what does that mean to you? And how does that connect with even the story and background I gave?
Yeah, good stuff, man. So first of all, with your story, that scenario that you just played out, I feel like that plays out in so many different arenas.
Yeah.
I've actually seen that played out in the black church. I've seen it played out in white majority churches, where they will basically use whomever they need to use for whatever culture they need to use them from in order to achieve their goal, or to make things look good or feel good.
Right.
You'll find that many churches right now are having their Hispanic churches on the outside, or offset on a Saturday night or something. And right now that feels good in America, because hey, our church is helping out the Hispanic culture, and that's a beautiful thing. So I guess the one thing we can say is we can commend churches for doing some kind of good. That's a beautiful thing. So there is some good that comes out of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes you wonder if if it's actually creating more hurt in the long term, by having these short-term wins, And so I believe in the whole idea of doing life together, because I believe it's so valuable. I believe if people really do it, I believe there are just so many great wins from it. And me and you talk about this a lot, man. And, and me and you are sort of examples of it. I mean, we do life together. Because of it, our relationship has lasted from a long-term perspective. It wasn't some short-term kind of hit and run.
Right.
Hey, let me get this from you. Let me win this off of you. Let's have this interaction. And I get what I need and you get what you need. And now it's over, me and you can pick up the phone and talk, not having talked for 2 months and talk. And
sure.
It's like, what's up? What's going on, man? How you doing?
That's it. Now, and I'm going to let you finish, but is that because of the culture? Because we're black? Because, that is a natural connect.
It is. I think...
Or is it our personalities?
I think it's probably more of our personalities.
I agree.
I don't know if it's necessarily the culture.
I agree.
Because, if we say culture, then that's going to simplify and say that, well, only certain things, from a relational standpoint, only certain things exist within black guys, and it can exist within white guys. And we know that relationship doesn't discriminate against anyone. Relationship is big and wide, which is one of the major points that I think about when I think about the idea of relationship. Relationship is big and wide.
Sure.
Which means that we all should be leaning towards wanting to do relationship with people, okay? Now, why is this very important? Because the norm of our flesh is that we don't. We usually create these little circles where we basically say, hey, this is my circle. I have no desire to be big and wide. And if I do choose to be big and wide, I'm only going to allow whoever I want to allow in the circle. And if you come into my circle, I'm going to kick you out. Because this is my big and wide circle. But with relationship, from a godly perspective, relationship is big and wide. It's really leaning into the Holy Spirit and saying, hey, man, bring whomever you feel needs to be brought into this circle.
Sure.
And teach me how to do life with them,
I get that, and you're right.
Yeah.
But there are, with personalities such as ours, which also happen to be people of color, we still are able to interact and cross-intersect into other cultures and races naturally.
Yes.
Why is it so difficult in the reverse?
I think it's just a challenge of difference, man. I just think it's a challenge of difference. And I mean, the challenge of difference is hard on anyone. Okay? Yeah. Here's why it's not hard on us. We don't get to choose. We don't get to choose. We're in the minority culture.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
you know, it's sort of like, you know, a culture of people, the Hispanic culture coming over here to America. They only get a choice,
right?
You know, right. Either you learn English or you just don't
right.
get the interactions that you need to get. You don't buy things at the store. You don't get to go in a bank and figure out how to open a bank. You can't work. You don't have, you know, you can't maneuver.
Can't opt out.
And so they don't have a choice. Learn it, or just or get out.
Right.
So we don't really have a choice. We've had to learn how to do that. The white culture is the majority culture here in America.
Right.
There's no, I have to invite you in, or I have to learn your culture, or I have to even embrace your thoughts or ideas.
Sure.
So there is a greater challenge that the majority culture really has in learning how to embrace. And I'll tell you, man, I don't even actually think it's something that the white culture should even just see as, hey, this is something that, works or exists within the American culture. I actually think it's actually something that the white culture needs to learn how to do.
Yeah.
How to lean in and embrace people from other cultures. Because again, that big and wide scenario can play very well in their world, to whereas the only people that they actually end up associating with it are people who look like them, or people who are on their economic levels, and the list goes on and on.
And I think obviously we could go in a bunch of different directions, because I think there's one part that they don't see the need or the benefit to expand outside of their normalcy. But at the same time, the reason you and I are having this conversation is so not only we can have fun and chatting, but so that others can hear what we're discussing and learn how to expand beyond and make sure that they're not missing the people that are within their reach. And so even in the story that I told about being invited to the services that weekend, I've told that story before, and people have been like, "Oh man, what'd you say back to? I know you went on. Oh, how did you?" And I said no, because there's a time for that moment, and that time happens gradually as two people make a decision that they want to do life together and they want to build a relationship. Meaning that we have to be careful not to try to address diversity and color lines and cross-cultural spaces in one conversation and one dialogue, because there's always the mainstream or the majority that are able to have that conversation, go back home, and sleep like it's nothing. But those of us that may be the minority due to color, due to economic status, due to personality, we're the ones that have to carry the weight of the challenges to bed and lie awake. And so I think that also plays a part. Would you agree that we have to be intentional about saying, hey, are you interested in building a relationship with me so that we learn together?
Well, here's something that I think is so interesting that I've observed over my life in our society. And so that scenario that you played out just now is obviously very real. It's been existing within the American culture for very long.
Yeah.
The other part that I also see happening is in the minority culture with us as black folk or the Hispanic culture, we'll find ourselves now going into our little circles and creating our little worlds,
right,
and having our biases. In other words, really becoming prejudiced towards or racial towards the majority culture, the white culture, or even the Hispanic culture, and for justifiable reasons. Very justifiable reasons, but not justifiable from a God perspective. See, that's where it has to be challenged. Okay. And so when I look at all of that, again, I gotta keep myself as Pastor Dorrien a whole lot.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
In other words, I got to let the Jesus come out of me, because if I don't, Fred, I'll find myself probably doing the same thing from a justified worldly perspective. I can justify it all day long.
No.
I'll create my big and wide circles and only allow the guys who look like me and who play with my rules to come into my circle. But I can't live like that.
Right.
I've got to lean in, because I know that there's something greater and better when I lean into individuals who are different than me.
Absolutely.
And so, the thing that comes to mind so much is, man, we walk into the cafeteria, and the first thing that we do when we walk in there is we look for individuals who look like us.
But that's our natural tendency.
But not from a God perspective. I believe that God challenges that tendency, that fleshly thing that exists within us.
Wow.
I believe that he does.
Really?
I believe he challenges it. No different than the scenario that Jesus brings to the table, where Jesus is hanging out with all of his cultural friends.
Right.
And they're all, they got it. They understand, hey, man, we hang out with our own. We ain't hanging out with those guys over there. Gentiles? No, man. And Jesus changes his script and says, no, man, they're included too. They get to play too. And so I think we got to stay with this thing from a Jesus perspective, because if we don't, what happens is our culture overrides Jesus. And that's a big deal when you look at the church, man. Culture ends up superseding Jesus, and it's like, hold up here. How in the world did culture ever supersede Jesus? And so that's where I begin to challenge individuals that, diversity in relationships is good. Our fleshly perspective will be that we only hang out with people who look like us, or people who make us feel safe.
Right.
However, the Jesus perspective says, dude, there are no rules to that. We hang out with all people, not focused on past hurts or pains or wounds. We've got to be able to grow through that stuff and push through that stuff.
There has to be a balance somewhere, though, man, because, hey, and I'm a lover of people, but sometimes I want to hang out with my people. And you have to be careful, not as you were sharing, not to remain comfortable in staying with our own culture. But Dorrien, how do we as people, as a society, what are some practical steps that we can do to start trying to create, not keep it like this, but how do we get a little bit more balanced in learning how to love and learning how to let other people know that who you are and what you do matters to me?
Well, I'll tell you right out of the gate, man, it'll never be balanced. It'll never be balanced.
That's true.
Let me tell you something, man. The norm of what is going to play out, and I'm not talking about worldly guys and guys who are not a part of the church. I'm talking about people in the church. So here's somewhat of a challenge for you people who are watching this, and that is, you're going to find godly folk, even after hearing something like this, a message like this, that you need to lean into hanging out with people who are different than you. And I'm not only talking about culture or color. I'm talking about just people who are different than you, who are not necessarily introverts or extroverts, or individuals who are passionate versus non-passionate. Stop being discriminate towards individuals who don't act like or who don't behave like you. Like, we all bring something to the table, and we all benefit greatly from the differences that exist within individuals. The problem is that that's hard. That's challenging in itself, because again, you're asking someone to leave their circle. Dude, I'm comfortable in my space, and I am comfortable around people who don't challenge me, people who don't poke the box. I mean, you're talking about asking people to go into a world where you may challenge a belief or a perspective that I have, that I've grown up with for years upon years upon years. You're asking me to do the tough thing, Fred.
Yeah.
You're asking me to do the hard thing. The majority, they're not going to lean down that path. They're not. It's tough. And I'm talking about God folk. And this is the reason why the 11 o'clock hour, well, 10:30 for some folk now. Church starts 10:30 now.
Some 10 o'clock. Yeah, 10 o'clock. Yeah.
It's still the most separated hour of our lives, of our time.
Yeah.
It's still, even today. Now, we know that it has changed. It has improved a whole lot. And that's a topic for a whole nother day.
Yeah.
But it's still happening. And so it's not going to happen from a majority standpoint, but it can happen one person at a time. It can happen one person at a time. And so the thing that I always would tell individuals is, hey, man, you just start doing it. I'm not into dialogues, okay? So me and you talk about that a lot. A lot of people like to have dialogues.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of dialogues happen around the country, Nashville, Atlanta, where individuals was, we need to have a dialogue. We need to dialogue. We need to have a debate, discussion, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm tired of those.
So I grew up in our society listening to that kind of stuff, going to conferences, and they're just coming up with some good stuff.
Right.
After the conference was over, it didn't go anywhere, Fred.
Because they don't want to change any systems.
No.
They don't want to change any structure.
No. Yeah. I mean, it was just talk.
Yeah.
You know? And so for me, man, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, I always felt like, well, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it. The cool thing that God has done in my life is he's given me a multicultural church where we have all cultures of people, all colors of people coming and participating and being a part of it. Now, here's what's so interesting about that, and that's so rare, and that is you just rarely find a church or an organization where a black guy is leading white people. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
That's just very rare in our society.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing.
Sure.
I mean, why can't it or why shouldn't it be happening? And I ain't doing nothing crazy out of the box. I mean, you see me here. I'm not some, spectacular kind of person. I don't put on a wig to jump 5 times in order to make it happen. I am myself. That's right. And I bring to the table the skills that I've learned over the years. And so if you would ask the question, well, what do you think brings individuals who are white to the table? And I would say it probably has a lot to do with what's going on in their heart. Because I'm telling you, man, they're the majority. There is no reason why they would need to come to a guy like me who don't look like them, who probably don't act like them in some ways. I maybe don't listen to their kind of music. I don't know. But the Jesus thing is a consistent thing that's across the board that we all have in common. Yeah. And we are doing life together. We really are, man.
Yeah.
No,
that's good, man. We are getting close to running out, and so, I want you to maybe give 1 or 2 more nuggets. You've already mentioned a few, and I like where you just mentioned about the heart, because I feel like, sure, our society, our country, we're still in great depths of separation. There's still a lot of separation between people.
More now than ever.
But I feel like when you talk about the heart, there's something stirring in the heart of people now that, as a result of the tragedies that we are experiencing and hearing about in our country, there's something where people are feeling, they have a feel that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
And now is a great moment for people to be able to help other people learn how to connect, because I think that heart piece is thirsting, to say, what can I do?
Yeah.
And how do I do it? And so, what would be 1 or 2 things as we get ready to close this first part 1 on Let's Do Life? What would be 1 or 2 things that you would, say, hey, here's what you can do?
Yeah. One of the first things, Fred, that I always say is, I think you really got to be able to, you hear a message like this, it's like, okay, where do I go from this, man? This is good stuff.
Right.
And one of the first things I feel like you got to do is you got to be able to discern, like, who is God asking me or wanting me to do relationship with?
Yeah.
And so if this is totally foreign to you, and everyone in your circle has just been the same kind of people, and you really feel like, man, there's some horrible things happening in our society. All my friends are white, or all my friends are black, or all my friends are Hispanic. I want some different kind of people in my life, And again, this is a topic for a whole nother day. But again, you got to understand there are benefits and blessings that come from a diverse platform of relationships. All right, that's
another deal, though. You're right.
We could preach that. I'm telling you, that's a whole nother message there. The benefits and blessings that come from
there's a benefit in being
of people. Yeah. Okay. However, let's stay right here. And so discerning, being able to discern. But and then secondly, man, after you discern, like God will say, Dorrien, I want you to go over there and I want you to do life with Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I gotta have the boldness to lean into that.
Yeah.
And to say, Johnny, hey, man, I think that I'm supposed to do life with you. I think after that, man, having the boldness to lean into it, now the question becomes, well, what does that even look like?
Yeah.
Like when we say do life together, and we may be able to talk about this in the next episode, what does that even look like? You know? And so for me, man, I've really created a really awesome, agenda as to, okay, here's what this looks like. So one of the things I usually do is I'll usually say to the individual, hey, man, I don't want to just do a cup of coffee with you. Hey, I want to meet with you, man, for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to meet with you for the next year. Hey, let's meet up every week. Hey, let's meet up every other week. Hey, let's meet up once a month. We'll decide what it looks like.
Right.
And hey, the agenda might be weird. I don't know what the agenda is, but
you come over to my crib.
Yeah,
I come over to your crib.
But we're going to do life together. It's not going to be, hey, man, let's do lunch together sometime.
Right.
That's the norm of what we do in our society. We may do it or we may not even get to doing it. And so figuring out what that next thing is as to, okay, this is what doing life together is going to look like, Yeah. I've got a pastor buddy we just started to do life together, and we were meeting over at Starbucks every other week, and then, actually once a month, and now we're doing a once a week deal playing basketball together.
Oh, wow.
That's going to have to change, too, because my knees can't do it.
Hey,
I know where you're
at. Yeah, man. Yeah. Let's end this podcast. My knees killing me. No, I'm just kidding.
And so we're going to probably change that up into doing something else. But by us doing life together, dude, we've already learned a lot about each other. Now, he's a white guy, I'm a black guy, okay? Yeah. Initially, when this started, he felt like he really wanted to lean into the whole, Dorrien, I want to lean into the black thing, and I want to learn about the failures and the pains and the sufferings and all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, you got to understand, when you want to go into those kinds of things, those are very personal, private, intimate parts of my life.
Yeah.
And when I talk about that stuff, it's very touching, man.
Right.
And so I've had moments in my life where I have recklessly and casually done that with white folks who have said, hey, man, tell me about what it feels like to be black, or, man, does that hurt your feelings when this certain thing happens, or, man, young black men are getting shot, man. Hey, man, how's that feel?
Yeah.
And so that's, again, those kind of moments happening without it being prepped, or without me being prepared or ready for them, and then me recklessly, passionately talking about this very intimate, passionate place in my heart in regards to horrible things that have happened or sad things that have happened, and it usually is just sort of covered over. They usually run and go on with life, and I'm just stuck there like, man, I just exposed a really sad part of my life, and that just really sucked.
Yeah.
And so I am a little bit more protective on that, and I challenge my white colleagues or anyone that wants to lean into that world and say, hey, we're not going to casually go into this. I want to do life with you, and I want you to be my friend. And because if I lean into the storyline, and this is a major miss that happens, if I was to talk about something that's very touching and hard and harsh at times to talk about, there is a possibility, and many times this happens, you will misunderstand some things that I will say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by you misunderstanding some things that I'm saying, you're in turn going to respond to me, and I'm in turn going to get offended by the fact that you can empathize, the fact that you can understand. So before we go into all that, let's just be friends first.
We're going to stop right there.
All right, good stuff.
Right
good stuff. Good stuff.
There. Love it. Hey, you've been listening to Dr. Dorrien Hinsey here as we discuss topics about reachable reconciliation. You might have heard a lot of black and white talk. However, when we're talking about reachable reconciliation, again, we want to make sure that you understand that it is not about race and culture alone, but it's learning how to not bypass the people that are right within your reach. And that is more than just race and color. So as you tune into this podcast, you will see other people from other backgrounds that will also be sharing in a very passionate arena. But going back to today, I want to thank you for coming today. This is part one.
Enjoyed it.
Of Let's Do Life. And so we definitely want to see you come back and listen to part two in Let's Do Life. Do you have a teaser of what that might look like, Dorrien? What would the second part look like? Don't go into depth.
Okay. Well, I think, Fred, again, we can talk about this stuff, and sometimes this stuff can seem very big and wide. So the next area would probably be, okay, so once we're doing life together, what is in that package?
Yeah.
Like what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Like what's that agenda looking
Absolutely.
like? So
That's
I
great.
think that'd be cool to talk about.
That's great. Hey, listen, we want to thank you for tuning in. If you're ever in the Cincinnati area and you want to visit a church, or if you do live here now and you're looking for a great place to fellowship, please visit Compass Community Church, which is where?
It's in Springdale, Ohio.
Okay. Address?
on Northland Boulevard, 161 Northland Boulevard, 161 Northland Boulevard.
And
love to see you come over.
Love to see you come. And so, hey, we thank you for listening today. We're excited about you embracing reachable reconciliation. And until next time, be blessed.